Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another FIFA 22 video where today we're going to be sharing with you a great video for anyone who is a really bad defender and is just not a great player at defending, and maybe a beginner or just someone who's just really struggling and struggled for a long time. And today I'm going to be sharing with you the two best tips that I can give you that are going to really catapult your defending forwards, and that could potentially mean more goals, more chances, more wins, and then obviously more rewards, and then that means more coins, which could potentially mean you can afford better players and have a little bit more enjoyment of the game. So a lot of things to be benefited from today's video today. So one of the first things when it comes to defending that everybody struggles with, and one of the biggest things that I would say is going to improve your defending massively, is to rely, and that is the key word, rely on the AI to do a lot of the defending for you. Now this is a touchy subject, and I personally don't like the fact that the AI is so involved in defending, but right now it is the most effective way of defending better, and it is one of the best things that you can do, and it's one of the things that a lot of the top tier defenders and top tier players do. You have to let the AI defend for you, and as unethical as that may be and as kind of boring as that may be, it is the most effective way. The more manual defending that you try and do, meaning the more you try and do yourself, actually the worse you make the problem. And a good example of that is player switching. Now, player switching in this game is generally quite poor. A lot of the time you might be controlling, let's say for example, your left cam, and you're just trying to switch into your left DM. And sometimes the game will think you're trying to switch to your left back or your left centre back. And then you're trying to panic switch, getting the right player. You're in a panic trying to switch back to the correct player. Meanwhile, you're not focusing on the game and what's actually happening, what your opponent's doing, and before you know it, the ball's on the other side of the pitch, and you're still trying to get back that left DM. So player switching in this game is generally quite poor, and more importantly, it's not very accurate. And the more you try and player switch, the more you're going to drag more players out of position, and the easier it is for your opponent to attack. Thinking about it from the other perspective, the people who are most easy to play against are the people who are constantly dragging players out of position, and that's because they're player switching too much, especially more critically in the midfield. You really need to try and not player switch too much in the midfield and in your defense. And the biggest thing when it comes to player switching is it becomes more of a critical error the further and further back in your own half you get. So for example, player switching in your opponent's half is not such a big deal because they've got to still run 60-70 yards before it becomes a problem. But if you're frantically player switching at the edge of your own box, you're going to be dragging defenders and players out of position, and that's going to leave space for your opponent to exploit. So one of the things that you need to do is to try and just move around in the midfield and track with one player, and just switch from midfielder to midfielder, and really try and let your midfielders and team, because of the way the AI is controlled this year, it is a lot more clever and getting players back into position. And you have to just control those two midfielders and switch from side to side. So when the ball's on the left, control your left midfielder, ball goes to the right, switch to your right midfielder. And only if you need to get into one-on-one situations do you then need to change back into a different player. But really at all times, try to just let a lot of your AI do a lot of the defending for you. And as bad as that is the most effective way to defend, and that is where you will see the biggest progress when it comes to being a good defender in FIFA. And one of the other biggest things, especially now moving into 1v1 situations, so when we get into those 1v1 situations, which you inevitably will, because you can't control your midfielders forever, you're going to have to switch into other players. For example, if the ball gets played into the channel, one of the things that you're going to have to eventually do is get into 1v1 situations. And one of the biggest issues that I have and had, especially for many years when defending, was holding down the sprint button when I was trying to jockey, and that makes something called the sprint jockey. And when you're trying to hold the sprint button down and the jockey button at the same time, and if you go the wrong way, it sends your defender into the next football stadium. It really takes them out of the game, and you have to really try and avoid holding the sprint button down when you're in 1v1 situations, and just hold that left trigger or that L2 button for jockey only. Because what that does is it gives you a much higher chance, not a perfect chance, but it gives you a higher chance of being able to defend and switch direction a lot quicker. Because one of the things that when you come up against the top tier attackers in this game is they're very good 1v1 at getting you to sort of go one way and then go the other and then go the other. And if you're holding that jockey button down, it gives you the opportunity to be able to move with them. Not as quick as them, because the attacker always is going to move faster because he's got more agility, he's got more balance, he's got more reactions, all those things, but it gives you a much higher chance of doing that. And when you're holding the sprint button down, anytime, you really need to not hold the sprint button down anytime when you're trying to defend, whether that's with your defenders, whether that's your midfielders. You need to make sure you're always just holding that left trigger only when you're trying to defend, and that will give you a much higher chance of being able to make tackles. And also when you get back in the possession, when you do make the tackle, you're naturally holding that left trigger button, which then, instead of when you're out of possession, you're jockeying, now you win the ball, you make a tackle, now you're shielding the ball so that attacker can't get the ball back off you once you've won the ball. So those are the two critical tips that you really need to try and work on improving. Now, when it comes to defending, there's a lot more finer details to focus on, and maybe we'll focus on that in a further video. But today I just wanted to cover some of the basics that are going to dramatically improve your defending quick. These are the two things you need to work on the most, and everything else is kind of just fine details that will only make slight improvements in your defending. If you can nail these two things, your defending is going to massively improve, and then it's just about adding those fine details to really round off your defending to become a better player. So if you are someone who's a beginner, or if you're someone who has just really struggled with defending, make sure you practice on these two things. They're going to really dramatically improve your defending massively. But that is it for today's video, guys. So if you did find this useful, make sure you drop a thumbs up and subscribe as well if you are new to the channel. But that is all for today, guys. Have an awesome day. I'm out.